Thank you, and we will resume our meeting for our final item of the day, and thank you to everyone who's been waiting patiently for it to be called up. This is item number 11, which is to consider a report and presentation of the Advisory Task Force on Justice and Gender, adopt a resolution supporting the Bill of Rights for Children of Incarcerated Parents, and take related actions recommended by the task force as outlined in the memorandum of the county CAO. And we have Nicole Coburn
Good morning,
here to present this item.
Can you? So in April of 2017, Dr. Susan Green presented a report to the board that was supported by the Sheriff's Office entitled The Gender Matters, a profile of women in Santa Cruz County Jail. It was based on 31 interviews with women in the main jail in Blaine Street. In response to the report, the board convened the Advisory Task Force on Justice and Gender for a 24-month term. Representatives from health and justice leaders from county agencies, community-based organizations, and the community were appointed to the task force. The task force began meeting in December 2017 and is facilitated by Dr. Susan Green. Dr. Green has over 20 years experience in the criminal justice system. She has conducted and published a number of studies on women in jail with a focus on their social histories, risk factors that contribute to their incarceration, and what women face upon release from jail. She was also the founding director of the GEMA program and is currently a research associate in the psychology department at UCSC. Today, Dr. Green and members of the task force will be here to present recommendations in 3 areas. The first, reducing harm to children of incarcerated parents. The second, housing for women. And lastly, preventing and responding to sexual abuse in jails. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Green.
Good morning, members of the board, and thank you for convening this Advisory Task Force on Justice and Gender. I want to start by asking task force representatives to please stand and be recognized for your full commitment and participation in this effort to address and identify the unique needs of women cycling through our local criminal justice system. It's truly an honor to work alongside these health and justice leaders in our community. And I also want to extend thanks to our Assistant County Administrative Officer, Nicole Coburn, and Senior Administrative Analyst, Sven Stafford, for your guidance and support. And to Supervisor John Leopold for serving as the board's representative and showing up regularly. And to my UCSC research assistants for your dedication and lots of research behind the scenes. And I would like to again acknowledge the Sheriff's Office for supporting the Gender Matters research with women in jail that laid the foundation for this task force. Finally, I want to thank the Fairfield Inn and Suites on 41st Avenue, where they generously hosted our meetings in their beautiful conference space, because they too support our mission. We've had 10 meetings to date, and we're here today to present recommendations in the 3 areas that Nicole just identified. Thank you. Of the 31 women who participated in the Gender Matters study, nearly 3 out of 4 are mothers, and more than half had a parent who was also incarcerated. It is these cycles of intergenerational incarceration that guide the work of our task force. We've talked a lot about childhood trauma, with a focus on prevention and intervention. Intervention to help women heal and reduce recidivism, and prevention, supporting healthy families so that their children do not continue to suffer similar cycles of trauma and pain and incarceration. We try to be trauma-informed in our own meetings too, and to that end, I want to acknowledge that some of what we'll hear today is painful. But it is important that we talk about these issues to instigate positive change. And I encourage people for whom some of these issues may be triggering to please reach out for support as needed. Generally, discussions about criminal justice reform focus on individuals and less often consider their children or their roles and responsibilities as parents. I want to invite you for a moment to think of a person in your childhood who mothered you, maybe your biological mother, maybe somebody else, and think about that relationship. Our primary caregivers have significant influence on our development during at least the first decade of our lives, and often for years following. Those relationships, often complicated, are central to human development. I think we can agree that there's no question about the importance of the first years of life. And I know this board supports several related initiatives, including Thrive by 3, First 5, Nursing Family Partnership, and Cradle to Career. As the task force considers issues from the perspective of women and the effects on their children and families, we are committed to including people with lived experience in the criminal justice system. And there are several identified representatives on the task force who bring experiences to life and are also models of resilience, healing, and transformation. They are not just there to share their stories. They are experts and help strategize, organize, and lead in efforts to help reform our criminal justice system to do less harm to individuals and their families. It is my honor to introduce to you one of those leaders, Chad Platt, who's going to speak about his experiences related to our first recommendation, reducing harm to children of incarcerated parents. Chad is a youth advocate who's a model of resilience, strength, and power, and a true leader dedicated to positive changes for youth and our communities.
Thank you, Susan, and thank the board for having me here today as well. What I'm sharing with you today happened some time ago. However, with my work in the community as a youth advocate, it's something that I see reoccurring. It's something that we can end, and it's something that we can come together as a community with to better serve children of incarcerated parents. I was 9 years old when I witnessed my mother being arrested. I had so many questions, and it was all a mystery to me. There was a raid at our residence, and my mother was taken into cuffs. I was told to take a bag of my belongings, and we were separated. I strongly advocated to be able to speak with my mom, just to have some sort of understanding. At 9 years old, I was aware that my mom had a substance abuse problem, but the fact that there was, police at our door and my mom in handcuffs, it was a complete mystery to me. The officers at the time were explaining to me I wasn't able to speak with my mom, and although I was 9 years old, I wasn't taking no for an answer. So the officers did an amazing thing for me. They let me hug my mom in handcuffs, and she explained to me that the people that I would be going with would take care of me. I was moved into a temporary foster care situation. I actually had 2 separate short-term living situations before I was placed at a comfortable foster living arrangement. And during this time, not being able to speak to my mother, not being explained what was going on, although I was a child, these were things that I was asking for. These were things that I was ready to hear. And by not explaining and by not telling me, it only painted a very dark picture in my mind. With the media, with what we see on movies, I was under the impression that, my mom's in the big house, and not understanding that whether it's Blaine Street Women's Jail or Santa Cruz County Jail, it's a lot different than what's put on the media. However, at 9 years old, I'm only putting together what I see on TV. During my mom's stay at Blaine Street Women's Jail, there are several things that would have ultimately made her stay there more comfortable and also had a better time for me. Simple things like pictures. I remember being able to visit my mom, and the difference between playing hangman through the glass at the county jail and not being able to hold her hand, not being able to hug her, versus going into Blaine Street and having that opportunity to touch and feel was amazing. However, being in the foster care system, there's no opportunity to take pictures with your parent. And although it's a jail setting, it would have been amazing to have some photographs, to have something to look forward to. Although this happened when I was 9, it is something that is still happening in our community today. Looking over the Bill of Rights for Children of Incarcerated Parents, it's something that I would love to see adapted. It's something that this community absolutely needs. It's been adopted by the state of California, and with the steps forward that I've seen the community making since I was the 9-year-old that this had happened to, there's been leaps and bounds, and I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to tell my story and hopes to create change and impactful change in this community. To speak more about the Bill of Rights and ways to support children of incarcerated parents, I'd like to invite Cynthia Chase up. Thank you.
I also want to express my thanks to the chair and the board members for making this issue a priority by hearing from the Justice and Gender Task Force today. Several of us on this task force have been working locally on this issue for decades, and it provides us and those we're advocating for with hope to see the board give its time and attention to hearing from the broad, highly skilled group of subject matter experts, including those with lived experience, who have crafted a series of recommendations for your consideration. We believe these recommendations will improve the lives not just of justice-involved women, but also their families and the community at large. One of the many things the Justice and Gender Task Force has addressed is how we can reduce the collateral damage that is caused at as many decision points as possible when a woman is engaged in the justice system. Generally, the justice system is viewed as a necessary interruption to harmful behaviors that are occurring in the community, with the intention of addressing and preventing those behaviors from occurring again. However, what we also need to recognize are the decades of research that shows that these interruptions don't just affect the life of the individual, but because most women are the primary caregivers for their children, these children's lives are also interrupted, sometimes in highly traumatic and damaging ways, as Chad outlined in his own personal experience. Their family, home, school, health, and well-being may be impacted, and often decisions are made for them without them. What data has also shown us is that incarceration is intergenerational. Children who experience a parent or primary caregiver's incarceration are much more likely to experience the same life path. The way to break that cycle is by responding differently to circumstances that we know can be harmful but are preventable. A key way to recognize, protect, and provide better outcomes for the children of women who are justice system involved is by following the lead of the California legislature, who adopted the Children of Incarcerated Parents Bill of Rights in 2009. Therefore, the Justice and Gender Task Force requests that the Board of Supervisors adopt a resolution supporting the Bill of Rights for Children of Incarcerated Parents and direct the Human Services Department, Health Services Agency, Probation Department, and Sheriff's Office to identify opportunities and partners for implementation and to report back to the Board during budget hearings in June 2019. We very much appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you today to present these recommendations, and it is now my duty to turn over the next part of our presentation to Probation Division Director of Adult Services, Sarah Fletcher. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Fletcher, and in addition to working for the Probation Department as the Adult Division Director, I'm also a community member. I want to start by saying that it has been a privilege to participate in this task force, and I truly appreciate the board's efforts in supporting the group's formation. I'm here this morning to briefly talk about how reducing harm to children at the time of arrest is a prevention effort to reduce psychological trauma that often contributes to intergenerational cycles of pain and incarceration. As you can see from the image up on your screen, memories endure. Kids who witness their parents' arrest event may be traumatized by the sounds and images for years. The experience may lead to nightmares, separation anxiety, aggressive behavior, withdrawal, trouble concentrating in school, or a variety of other mental and physical problems. A well-coordinated response by the agencies involved at the time of arrest to make sure a child is safe and informed can make a difference. This helps to support the relationship between children and their parents, which enhances a child's healthy development. And finally, negative experiences can color future interactions with authority. Children's images of police developed during these encounters can have lasting effects on their views of law enforcement and their future willingness to cooperate with police and abide by the law. The International Association of Chiefs of Police has identified an on-scene checklist for law enforcement to safeguard children of arrested parents. It is understood that many officers already use a number of these strategies and that there are situations where it's not possible or safe for arresting officers to put these into practice. Police officers can be a powerful protective factor that decreases the potential harmful effects of parental arrest on children. In October, we invited Chad and Susan to attend the monthly commanders meeting to introduce these efforts and provide an opportunity for our partners to hear a portion of Chad's story, as you had the opportunity a few moments ago. Most local law enforcement agencies have written policies on this subject, but many do not provide ongoing training or implement data collection in this particular area. The task force representatives are now working with several agencies to schedule trainings and include presenters who, as children, experienced the arrest of a parent. With several of our agencies being both members of the task force and regular attendees of the commanders and chiefs meetings, we are committed to using these roles to keep the dialogue ongoing. I'll conclude with our task force's second recommendation, which is to request that the board chair write a letter to the mayor of each city, the Santa Cruz County Law Enforcement Chiefs Association, and the California Highway Patrol, highlighting the importance of each law enforcement agency having a regular training on reducing harm to children who are present at the time of arrest, along with data collection and annual reporting. Thank you for your time, and I will now hand it over to Patty Quillen, a community representative on our task force.
Good morning. Women are the fastest growing segment of America's jail population. Nationally, their numbers have increased 14-fold from 1970 to 2014. And in California, the women's jail population increased almost 7-fold from 1,725 in 1970 to 12,054 in 2014. Close to 80% of women in jails are mothers of children under 18 years old, and many of them are single mothers. The 2017 Gender Matters study by Dr. Susan Green found that here in Santa Cruz County jails, nearly 3 out of 4 women were mothers, and out of all the mothers in her study, only 1 in 5 received a visit from her child while in custody. Relationships between children and parents are the foundation upon which children learn how to trust and depend on others. As we heard from Chad, when a child loses a parent to incarceration, it can be traumatic. When the parent-child bond is interrupted, it can have long-term effects, leading to issues like antisocial behavior, poor school performance, physical and mental health problems. Due to these issues, children with an incarcerated parent are also at increased risk for criminal behavior, contributing to the cycle of intergenerational incarceration. There are some children for whom it would not be in their best interest to have contact with their parent for a number of reasons. But when family visits are appropriate, studies show that they can help maintain the familial connections, mitigate some of the trauma of separation for both the parent and the child, and reduce recidivism. Parent-child visits are consistent with one of the central tenets of the Children of Incarcerated Parents Bill of Rights, specifically that children have the right to speak with, see, and touch their parents. A growing body of research supports the use of contact visits, which allow children to see that their parents are safe and healthy while in jail and can help reduce the children's feelings of abandonment and anxiety. Physical contact and privacy during visits can benefit both parents and children, helping them reconnect with each other. Many experts believe that contact visits conducted in supportive, safe, and child-friendly environments are the best option to help families reduce the harmful effects of parental incarceration. Research indicates that visits are most beneficial when they are part of a family strengthening program and provide proper emotional preparation beforehand, as well as debriefing afterwards. And now I'll just read the task force request. The task force requests that the board ask representatives from Family and Children's Services, court-appointed special advocates, the Sheriff's Office, and the task force to consider the value of visits for children of incarcerated parents and to facilitate more opportunities for communication and visits between children and their parents who are in local jails. The need to understand barriers to visitation by speaking with mothers in jail has been identified as one of the first steps. Thank you.
The next area, topic area, is related to housing. And although housing was not a specific meeting topic that we focused on to date, concerns about the lack of safe housing and the high rates of homelessness among women in and out of jail came up consistently. Task force representatives reiterated the reality that the lack of safe housing for women is the biggest barrier to safety, both for individuals and the community, and often leads to further trauma, relapse, and reincarceration. Women are not only the fastest growing population of people in our jails and prisons, but are also the fastest growing population of people who are homeless. I'd like to introduce Nicole Cadle, one of our local leaders and task force representative.
I'd like to start by saying thank you to Susan for this opportunity, and John and Nicole as well for all of your help on this committee. In the roughly 11 years I've lived in Santa Cruz County, housing has never been anything that came easy for me. Prior to my own personal involvement in the criminal justice system, even as a doughy-eyed college student, I was taken advantage of trying to secure accommodations for myself. Fast forward to 2013, and I'm completing my jail sentence at Blaine Street and asking, but where do I go from here? I don't have money, I don't have contact with my family yet, and all of my friends are either addicts or criminals. I was scared to leave jail. In jail, I was able to get clean, I was able to eat and have a warm place to sleep every day, and the people around me didn't cast harsh judgments based on my current reality. I was lucky, and I know that may sound confusing, because who in jail is lucky? But I was. I was offered the opportunity to go to the Gemma House, the one and only all-female, no initial cost program for formerly incarcerated women in Santa Cruz County. Little known fact. Did you know that the last time the county invested a large amount in a property for that kind of housing was in 2007 for the Gemma House? And it hasn't happened since. I was grateful for my time at Gemma, but with little skills and an attitude that none of my clinical team could rein in, I was discharged from the Gemma House in late November of 2013. I had nowhere to go. An old boyfriend offered me to stay at his house for a few days, but that wasn't a safe situation. Sadly, I had no other options. After a few terrible days and trying my hardest not to use drugs, I ended up moving to Southern California and leaving behind all of my support systems. There were no options for me in Santa Cruz. I didn't have the money to get into another program. I didn't qualify for AB 109, and I didn't have kids, so none of those special circumstance funds were available to me. I was lost, and I found myself in a place I did not want to be, with people who did not understand me at that time. I wanted to use to quiet the uncomfortable feelings of wanting to do better for myself, but having every door of opportunity shut in my face because I wasn't financially capable of paying for my recovery. Again, I will state that I was lucky. I had a grandma who was capable and able to rescue me and could support my placement in an all-female sober living environment run by Sobriety Works. I was lucky because I made it into one of only 5 programs here in Santa Cruz for women. Janus and Encompass both also have options for women, but the bed space is limited and the wait lists are long. There isn't enough capacity to meet the need, ever. I've lived and managed a 12-bed female sober living environment for 3 years, It was a great opportunity for me and truly saved my life. Not everyone gets that opportunity, though. Not everybody who has a grandma who can front the cost to get into safe housing. Sadly, the story of women who have to go back to unsafe situations, abusive relationships, or homelessness is way more common than my story of success. Countless times living in the sober living environment, I heard stories about women who lost their children to the CPS system because they were unable to secure housing in a timely manner, or women who were able to receive AB 109 funding, PACT funding, or another great funding opportunity, but then lost that, and what comes next? Self-sufficient living in Santa Cruz County? I think not. Even working full-time in Santa Cruz here today, I can't afford my own housing due to the high cost of living and wages, and yet we expect these women to just put their lives together, stop using drugs, get a job, get housing, take care of their kids, and become happy, content members of our community. In Dr. Green's Gender Matters report, 75% of the women in Santa Cruz County jails interviewed stated that they had experienced homelessness, and 50% of them stated that they had nowhere to go after their release. It's a terrible feeling knowing that you are doing everything you can to work on yourself, heal from trauma, focus on recovery, and at the end of all of that, your only options are to go back to the streets that led you to jail in the first place, or another trauma-inducing environment. The obstacles stacked in front of women as they exit incarceration are hard to dodge, even for those of us who fall under the lucky category. Even I was discharged from a program with little hope for what was coming next. For the women who end up on the streets, back in traumatic or abusive relationships and situations, or left alone, after every door they've knocked on has been shut in their face, the feelings of hopelessness create a pool so deep that you can drown in. I say it's time we stop shutting doors in the face of women and create more opportunities and pathways for success in this county. That opportunity can start with you. Take a chance like the Board of Supervisors did in 2007. That chance, that choice saved my life. What choices, what chances can you take today to save the lives of many others? Thank you.
Our final recommendation is related to preventing and responding to sexual abuse in custody. The Me Too movement has helped more people understand how vast and pervasive sexual assault and sexual harassment really is. Sexual violence against women is about power relationships, deeply rooted in the subordination of women to men, and pervades virtually all cultures, races, and classes. Incarcerated women report disproportionately high rates of sexual abuse, rape, and domestic violence, and are in an environment where they are under the control of mostly men with power over them, where they cannot escape their abusers, and where they often fear retaliation if they speak up. Next, I'd like to introduce Cassie Gazapura, a representative from the Public Defender's Office.
Good morning. Tens of thousands of women experience sexual violence in custody each year, with more than half perpetrated by jail or prison staff. Sexual abuse in jails and prisons is a systemic, nationwide crisis that has generally received less attention than sexual abuse outside of custodial settings. This crisis led to the U.S. Department of Justice's issuance of national standards called the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA, which requires detention facilities to give those in custody multiple ways to report sexual abuse and mandates that every allegation is investigated. Correctional staff does now receive PREA training, but abuse is still prevalent, and women in custody are often reluctant to report sexual abuse for fear of retaliation. In response to the arrest of correctional officer Marco Del Real for unlawful sexual contact with a woman in custody at the county jail, Sheriff Jim Hart convened a serious incident review board to examine the reporting and response systems in the jails and make recommendations for improvements. The task force applauds Sheriff Hart's actions and commitment to eradicate this abusive behavior. The recommendations that came out of this review board were presented by the Sheriff's Office to the task force last fall. Overall, task force representatives were encouraged by the recommendations and the progress reportedly already moving several of them forward. As a group, we also expressed concerns specifically around the recommendation to designate a sheriff's detective to investigate all allegations of sexual abuse in the jails. The task force has ongoing concerns about the optics and trustworthiness of hiring an internal detective who is employed by the same agency they are hired to investigate, and we recommend a contract with an external investigator for that reason. We believe it is in the best interest of the Sheriff's Office to use an external investigator, and other government agencies have data that supports this practice. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, for example, recently released a report on the U.S. Forest Service's process of handling complaints of sexual harassment, stating that there were many problems with their own internal investigations. They ultimately concluded that the practice of using internal investigators may have deepened the mistrust in the system, and the report recommended switching to a process of independent contract investigators to look into these types of claims for the purpose of creating more trust in the system overall. The second reason we recommend an external investigator is to ensure that women feel safe in coming forward, particularly when we know the statistics around underreporting. According to Jessie Lerner-Kinglake of Just Detention International, a group that works to end sexual violence in all detention facilities, rates of underreporting are even higher in custody. She says, quote, "On top of feelings of shame and the victim blaming that all survivors face, detainees who are sexually abused by staff are faced with the horrifying prospect of having to report the assault to their rapist colleagues and friends," end quote. The JAG Task Force looks forward to continuing this conversation and working together with the Sheriff's Department to explore different models that use external investigators for claims of sexual assault in custody. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation, and I want to thank our speakers again and task force representatives for bringing us to this point today. These recommendations are important steps toward reducing harm to children of incarcerated parents, increasing safety from sexual assault for women in jail and women experiencing homelessness, and improving community health and safety. I want to thank the board again for convening this task force and recognizing the importance of our work. We're not alone in our efforts, as there are thousands of people across the state and nation also working to strengthen families directly impacted by the criminal justice system and to do less harm. I came to graduate school here at UCSC interested in working with children of incarcerated parents as a point of prevention, and quickly learned that they are often an invisible group, and the best way to help them was to help their mothers. Here it is 25 years later, and I'm working with some of these children of incarcerated parents as adults. Working in partnership with these local leaders on the task force, I'm as motivated as ever to continue. And I continue to feel that the more I learn, the harder it is to walk away and pretend it's not my problem. Thank you for joining us in this important effort. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. On behalf of the board, on behalf of the community and women experiencing incarceration and their families, I want to thank all of you for your really amazing work. It helps to not only have the solid research and the best practices, but then also the input from lived experience, so we can get a real sense of how we can bend these systems or change these systems to get better outcomes for everybody involved. It's now an opportunity for questions. Supervisor Caput.
You bet. Yeah, I want to thank the task force for everything you've done. I remember this came up about, what, 2 years ago? Was that about right?
A year ago.
Yeah, a little over a year. Okay. And you've done a remarkable job. I remember on the list when they were talking about different problems in the women's part of the jail. And sometimes some of the easiest things were very, to fix, were very irritating to some. And I'm just curious there were two on the list that should have been able to be solved very quickly and easily. One was if you make a phone call, you're allowed so many phone calls or whatever, and if you called home and the children weren't home, you weren't allowed to call back. Has that been rectified? Let's say the mother is in the jail, she calls home, but her kids happen to be somewhere. Are they able to call back again, or have they lost their phone call?
I think that, I'm not sure that this specifically came up with relation. I think phone calls are made, there's a whole procedure, and they have to be made collect from the jail. So I don't know if you have, so anybody who's in custody makes collect phone calls. So if somebody on the other end is able to accept it and they're able to speak with their children in their home, otherwise they have to call back later.
Okay, they're allowed how many, one phone call?
I think there's, I don't think it's a number of phone calls. They have, all phone calls made by people in custody have to be collect calls to the person they're calling. So the person they're calling pays for the cost of the call.
Right, even if it's a local call?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other would be the television. Is that should have been solved a long time ago, but anyway.
Yes. So I had a feeling you might ask about this. Yes, we have solved the television issue. It is much more complicated than one might think to just have television in a jail, but the issue has been addressed.
And it's not necessarily on the same channel as the one in the men's.
Correct.
That's right.
And that's particularly an issue right now when football's on, because the women really don't want to watch that.
Well, actually, you remember that movie by Ken Kesey, One Flew Over the whatever. And one of the biggest things in that movie was about the television during a sports program and whether or not somebody wanted to watch this or that. So those small things, if you can't fix the small things, it makes people wonder if you can fix the bigger problems.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that.
Of course. Thank you.
Supervisor McPherson?
Yeah, I want to thank the task force and Dr. Green for bringing this to us, and I'm very pleased to be able to support your recommendations, especially those that are designed to reduce the harm to children and all. And to appreciate I also appreciate the recommendation on housing, which is a tremendous problem overall here. But, it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to get some reports back during budget session on several of these. The state, this county, has tried to address housing issues overall, but I think this reminds us and directs us to pay some special attention to these formerly incarcerated women and their families. So I do appreciate that. It's a huge problem, or a huge issue that we need to confront, and we're going to do the best we can to do that. And I think it's legitimate to say that this, those women who have been incarcerated, and those especially with children, should get some special attention in this regard. So I hope we can do what we can. I might ask, I don't know who would be the right person to ask, if there have been any recent housing-related issues, which is a huge issue throughout the state, that the state has implemented that I might not be aware of addressing this issue specifically. I'm not sure that that's the case, but I surely think we should look into it to see if there are any recent pieces of legislation, grant program prospects and so forth, and how we can specifically address this population. So if I don't know if anybody has that answer now, but I would like to have that be part of the report back, and maybe it was going to be, but I'd like to see if there's anything recently that has come up that we should pay special attention to address this issue.
Thank you. So now we're going to hear from members of the public. I'd ask, if you're interested in speaking today, to please line up if you're able, and we'd love to hear your comments.
Good afternoon. I am Lynn Pejovic, the Executive Director of the Court-Appointed Special Advocates of Santa Cruz County.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Jimmy Cook. I am the Program Director at CASA of Santa Cruz and also a member of the Justice and Gender Task Force.
We are both social workers, and together we have about 50 years of experience working with traumatized and abused and neglected children. So we thought we would come forward today, one, because it's our job to advocate for traumatized children, but also to offer our support for the task force findings, the 3 recommendations, specifically the adoption of the Bill of Rights of Children of Incarcerated Parents, that action be taken to reduce the harm experienced by children who are present when their parents are arrested, and that steps be taken to facilitate contact between children and their mothers who are incarcerated. We'd like to address the last concern, contact between children and their mothers who are incarcerated.
As a former social worker here in Santa Cruz County in child welfare, I know firsthand that separation from a caregiver, from a parent, especially a birth parent, is traumatizing for a child. We've seen young children so stressed after their parent is arrested, they don't even play, they might not eat, they might not sleep, they have nightmares. They can at times just sit motionless with no expression at all on their face. To say the least, these children are not at all in a position to thrive.
And we also know that palpable relief that they experience as soon as they have that first contact with their parents, even if it's by a phone call. Unfortunately, what we know is oftentimes mothers who are in prison or in jail don't know where their children are, and they can't reach their children. So weeks can go by before this initial contact, and those children are left in that state of fear and anxiety and trauma.
Over the last couple of decades, there's been a lot of literature and research done about supervised contact between children and their parents. It's been established that regular, frequent contact is beneficial to the outcomes of these children. For this reason, we believe that contact between mothers who are incarcerated and their children should be frequent and regular unless deemed a detriment by the court to that child.
We also know that the environment that this contact is held in is very, very important. The outcomes for those children are much better if the contact is held in a child-friendly environment. And for that reason, we're asking 3 things. One, that you consider having visitation and contact set up very quickly, that it be regular and frequent when appropriate, and that it be held in a child-friendly environment.
In summary, we're very respectful that the board consider these steps that the Justice and Gender Task Force has presented before you, so that the contact between children and their incarcerated mothers be established very quickly. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Mary, and I would like to address the children thing. I have been state raised. I have been in prison most of my life. I also have 2 children that have been affected by my stay in prison and in jail. I have a son that's 15 years old, and I was pregnant through my whole incarceration. So and when I was let out, I was using drugs, so my son was drug exposed, and I was incarcerated. My son was taken away, and both my children have been affected by my incarceration, and so we have been separated. So now my son is part of mental health, and so is my daughter, and I have no relationship at all with both of them. And so now I am trying to get reunified with them, and I'm CPS involved, but CPS is not, they don't contact me at all. Like, they don't, try to say, hey, I want to try to reunify with you at all. So what I would like to see is, because now I'm part of BHU mental health, and I would like to see maybe probation and the court systems try to help me get involved, so that way we can have maybe some type of visits or something. Since you guys are talking about this, it's bringing up some feelings that, around that. So maybe you guys can, like, you know, maybe probation or like maybe Judge Guy with the BHU, you know, like try to like work something out with that. And then like also with the homelessness thing about, what's that? Oh, I got 59 seconds. With the homelessness thing, I also was affected by that. I was doing very good in Blaine Street, and I had no resources, and got let out and went back on the levee. And without BHU and probation right now, I'm doing good and I'm healthy, but without you guys, without probation and stuff, I wouldn't be doing good. But please help the women in the jail system, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Emily Bally, the Deputy Director of the Human Services Department, and I also have the privilege of being our department's representative on the Justice and Gender Task Force. I just want to say that this experience has been really great for me personally, and to hear from people with lived experiences and their children to help us inform our policies and procedures has been, I just can't express how invaluable that is to us. I also want to give some thanks to Susan for her dedication and commitment to this effort. And I look forward to our department working with the other county departments and our community partners to move these forward. Thank you.
Buenos dias, good morning. My name is Teresa Carino, and I am on the task force, and I'm also a commissioner for the Santa Cruz County Women's Commission, co-founder and director of Salud y Cariño, an after-school program that promotes health and wellness for middle school girls. So as a woman, as a mother, as a community advocate, I strongly urge the County Board of Supervisors to listen to these recommendations that we've put before you. I'm honored to work on this task force, and I am proud of the recommendations that were presented here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shauna Riley, and I am grateful I live at Gemma, and thank you to Gemma. And so I'm fortunate enough to have come from jail to a place where I get to go to school, and I don't have to worry about a tent city that's growing. And it scares me because I know what goes on there, and it's domestic violence and drugs and a perpetual nightmare. And I wanted to let you know what happens in jail when you don't have a place to go and there's not enough programs for women. Morale goes down for women. You go, I don't have any hope, you know, so they don't think, okay, well, I'm going to get out of jail and I'm going to get my kids back and it's going to be great and I'm going to strive. They just go back to some bad situation and then they come right back to jail. So then they commit an even worse crime. So then when they come back to jail, now they take a prison sentence so they can get AB 109 funding. I don't know if you guys all know that. So now they're committing worse crimes so that they can get AB 109 funding, so that they can get into a program. I know it doesn't seem smart, but that's how you can get into a program in this county. So I've been into a lot of other counties where you don't have to take a prison sentence to get a program. You can go to a THU, you can go to a program, you know, like, it's kind of, to me, a little strange that you have to take a prison sentence to get a program in a county jail. So just kind of take a look at that, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jane Weed Pomerantz. I'm with Positive Discipline Community Resources. For over 20 years, we've provided classes in the detention facilities for positive discipline for parenting and recovery and worked with the GEMMA program. We highly support the recommendations before the Board of Supervisors today and commend your interest and efforts related to this issue. The children that we're talking about face incredible hurdles in their lives. And I want to just draw the parallel to the many women and also men incarcerated. There's a child inside each one of them who are trying to contend with and understand and make meaning out of the trauma that they've experienced in their lives. So it is a lifelong process. I just want to say that without the stability and routines, and also continued encouragement, the children of those that are incarcerated do not have the ability to learn. The cortisol is surging through their brains, and even if they are sitting at a desk in school, they are likely not able to learn, to be successful students. So we have to be thinking about how this relates to a holistic approach and how it relates to the individualized needs of the people involved. We support, as I said, we support the recommendations strongly and urge that in that holistic approach, that we do a lot more to make sure that it's not a one-stop, this is your treatment and good luck, but actually that there's a continual and sustained effort to help these families. I know from my experience teaching those classes that it is an intergenerational problem. Those children, because of their distrust, because of their fears, because of their traumas, are likely to be repeating the same patterns that got their parents into those chairs. Those relationship skills, for any relationship, require new understandings, awareness, and continued practice. So we do urge that you continue with educational opportunities for parents both on the inside and also once released to continue to learn how to rebuild those relationships that have been so severely damaged. Building the trust, solidifying the families, and helping them re-enter civic society is a holistic endeavor, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Sophia. I am a survivor, and I'm a mother of 2 young children, ages 2 and 7 months. After experiencing DV and needing to vacate my apartment for the immediate safety of myself and my children, in December of 2017, I have been unable to find stable long-term housing for my family in Santa Cruz County. This is through no fault of my own, as I have been extremely diligent in my searching. Transitional housing for women, particularly survivors, rearing families, is a necessity in this area. There is simply not enough affordable housing available, even with resources. The current market value is far beyond reach. Women like me need a place to call home while rebuilding and healing after becoming homeless or transitioning in and out of short-term shelters or on the streets. Rapid rehousing is not a bridge to stability, but perpetuates the cycle of homelessness. We need to aid them in women like me in their journey to becoming stably housed long-term and set them up for success as members of the community. It is within your power to strengthen the lives of myself, my children, and many other women and families. I hope that you can help us thrive here. Thank you for addressing these issues.
Hi, my name is Natalie Blackburn, and I've been involved in women's jail ministry with Peace United Church for 8 or 9 years. The first thing that I realized I had in common when I started visiting women in the jail is being a mother and having concern for my children. And that is the number one thing that women talk about and cry about and ask us to pray about is their children and that concern for them. They often have family members or ex-partners or their kids are in foster care, and those in those situations, they're often those people don't bring their children to jail and to visit them. So the children also lose the right to see their mothers. Another thing that I realized I had in common with them is being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and assault. When I share that story at all, when I go to the jail, I have heard a lot of stories about their experiences too, including fear of being on the street because of the amount of rape and also gang rape that they experience, being afraid to sleep outside. They often have to go back, if they don't have a place to live. People talk about their fear of not being able to stay clean because they have to go back to homes or family members who are using and also involved in crime. They also ask us to pray about them being on the JEMA waiting list as a common theme, being able to get onto a drug treatment waiting list, or also a large proportion of them have mental health issues. And as we know, this is also a big concern in our community, is also not enough mental health treatment and mental health housing.
Thank you.
Hello, board. Thank you for your listening, and I just wanted to acknowledge the task force and all these beautiful men and women for standing for our future and our children's. And I also, too, want to acknowledge the bond between the mother and the child. And when the parents are separated for the kids, it's blatantly apparent the impact on the life and their future that's going to have. And so I'm in support of having parental visitation with their kids, and also a request that some of the incarcerations and crimes are due to maybe drug-related unusatory issues, and that can just be a change of the way we see things. We can actually put people in rehab, not have it so criminalized, and offer help and services. As well as CPS. It's been shown that when kids are taken from their parents with CPS, and there's been several other speakers that have spoke on this, it's more detrimental to the kid, and the kid is that loss without the parent. And so instead of taking away the kid, having structures in place and help for the parents so that they can then excuse me, let me gather my thoughts, so that they can then have predominant lives and all that. So that's a couple requests. Housing was mentioned. I mentioned earlier this morning having like a place where people can go, like a sanctuary, they can pitch their tent, maybe have some rules, no drugs, you know, you can be searched to make sure you don't have anything on you, but a place where people can get back on their feet. So if there's anything you can like really look into to like, you know, deregulate all the stuff so people can be more free and expressed, that'd be awesome. And I just really want to acknowledge all these beautiful women here today. So, thank you.
My name is LaFlora Cunningham Walsh. I live in the 5th District. Love it up there. So I'm here today basically to support my family whose issues were brought up here today, as well as just to support the task force and say, just as one extra community member, I really, really value what they do. I really value the recommendations that they put forth. I know that this board is a board that can take those recommendations and implement them and even improve upon them in the future. I'd like to encourage you to fund this as properly as possible. And yeah, it's just really great to see that this issue is being addressed. It's great to see learn a little bit about the history here today. And I would really like to see that today be the day, just like 2007, where some progress really gets made. And 10 years from now, when we come to address the next set of issues, that today is a day that we can look back at as a cornerstone of our future altogether. Thanks, you guys.
Hi, my name is Elisa DeKiwag. I'm the clinical director of the JEMA House. First of all, I want to say thank you to the task force for the wonderful work that you're doing. It's really amazing. I have only been working for the Gemma House for about 7 months, and I've been working in treatment in Santa Cruz County for about a decade. And I was unaware of the unique capacities of the Gemma House. And I have to say, since working there, I am so floored by what we do. We offer women a unique place to heal from trauma, from all of the things that were mentioned here today. We offer a place for them to heal from that and not have to worry about the heaviness of bills. And we offer them a place to reunify safely with their children. So I would love to see another place like Gemma be funded. I would love to see more opportunities like this for the women in our county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie Mayetta, and I work for the courts. I am a social worker within the courts that's funded by a grant. I wanted to thank you guys so much for not only supporting this effort, but also financially backing and listening to all of the recommendations. Thank you so much to Susan Green for not only her passion and her research, but also for just continuing to keep this at the forefront of our minds. The women that I have the opportunity to work with are so inspirational. All of them have a heart in order to want to do better. That's not the issue. The issue is how do they get from where they're at to where they long to be. And that is the journey that we're talking about. We're talking about providing support, providing education. Most of the people who are struggling right now have experienced trauma in their past. They are a child of parents who have been incarcerated. They are the actual patients that we are striving to serve, who are trying to make it out of the criminal justice system. And we are asking for recommendations for housing, which I know is difficult, but we also need to recognize that housing is so much more than just temporary understanding or treatment. Some of the treatment that's provided is very limited, and a recovery journey takes longer than 30 days, takes longer than 6 months, takes longer than a year. And so when we're asking for these recommendations, we're also asking that the housing is housing with children. A Gemma House is fantastic, but we also need an opportunity for these women not only to go into housing where they can be successful, but also that they can bring their children with them. As they actually go beyond just finding housing, they're able to actually accomplish what they need to reunify with their children. They create a foundation to reunify with their children. Some of the housing opportunities that are there do not offer that, do not offer the ability for them to even go beyond their trauma and be able to become the parents that they want to be. And so we're also asking that you consider those factors as we're talking about children and as we're talking about women. All of them need the support necessary. And I want to thank you guys for even just considering this and also making the steps necessary for this to really better our community as a whole. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lila and I'm 19. I've been through the foster care system and my parents have been incarcerated. And I've also been homeless for a long time through high school, and I just wanted to say that there are a lot of young people who are homeless, and even though we have programs like CPS, sometimes, it's just not taken care of. And yeah, and I just wanted to mention that, and that these individuals who are young and trying to get their grasp on the world and figure things out, if things maybe went a little bit differently, maybe they wouldn't end up in a situation where they end up incarcerated or they end up being homeless in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria, and I just first want to say thank you to everyone that spoke today, and thank you to Susan. I am on the task force. Sorry for the tears that are coming, but I also work for Monarch Services. I'm an advocate, and I am a mother and a grandmother. When I just have to just say that I hope you all had your ears open and really took all of this in, because it's just not words. These are people's lives, women. I have heard so many stories from women in my office. I have responded to women that just got out of jail that were out in the street and got sexually assaulted. I have seen more than I wish I would have seen here in Santa Cruz County. And I just want to just say how thankful and fortunate I am working with such amazing people. My eyes have just been opened to so much more. And I just want to thank you all for taking your time. Thank you so much.
So I waited patiently. I heard the reports, heard the presentation, I heard the functionary bureaucrats, and I heard the design talkers come up in here. I'm well aware of this. You know, my sister raised Chad, right? And, you know, I consulted a lot of times with the foster care, you know, with my sister regarding the parenting. She said a lot of the parents they shouldn't have kids, right? She did her best, and she raised Chad, and he's a good kid. You know, and I want to be able to say this. It's interesting because as I listen to this, I just see the bureaucratic system want to expand, right? Want to invade the home and start taking care of the kids now and start acclimating them for jail, start taking them to jail. Our best bet is to get down to the root of the problem and deal with the unintended consequences, political oppression. If we're not going to deal with this oppression, we're going to bring it true healing. It's not just the women that need to be healed, it's the men. All right? You guys want to come in, divide the home, and then now you guys want to assert the nanny state to come in and take care of the people. There's a lot, you know, on this panel, they don't have no Mexicans that are coming from the community. Right? There's no faith-based organizations backing this. I would say they need real people from the community to be able to talk on this issue. I was patient enough to hear you guys, right? I'm offering a countervailing perspective, right? And that's what debate's all about. Because I don't want members of the public to get caught up in the demagoguing, because there's a lot of hardworking men and women that are struggling. We understand that the gentrification is real, but we're not going to deal with that. We understand that the criminal state wants to bring in the predatory culture and the punishing state. And yet the DA office and the sheriff department, hey, no one's dealing with that. You know, I'm going through a malicious prosecution. I got 130, I got to go and deal with it, right? And there's a lot of men that need to be reunited with their children. And there's men in jail that Chad needs his father, and there's a lot of other fathers in jail that need to be a part of their kids' lives so they can inspire them. We understand housing's important, right? But the gentrification, it's real. You know, well, I come in and day out in these meetings, and we hear it all the time. You know, members of the public we need to start reordering the public defender's office and have one organization that's going to represent the people's political rights, human rights, and civil rights, so that they're not dividing the families, and they're not allowing the sheriff department to pick on them, and not allowing the DA's office to pick on them, and just divide and ruin the home. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Craig Wilson, Undersheriff. I want to acknowledge the work of the Commission. We've been listening very closely, and on behalf of Sheriff Hart and myself, I just want to thank you for the work that you've done. We wanted to comment just briefly on the third recommendation about preventing sexual abuse in jails. We certainly appreciate everybody's interest in keeping our jails safe, and everyone, whether they're in custody or out of custody, and we work toward this. When Sheriff Hart learned that there was an allegation of an officer who had abused someone in jail, he immediately started a criminal investigation that led to the arrest of the offender, an officer. He also conducted an internal investigation that led to sanctions against employees for reporting delays. But we didn't stop there. We formed a serious incident review board, which you've heard about, and we wanted to include community members and people with lived experience. And we included 4 prominent women that work with the Commission for Justice and Gender. We heard from investigators and prosecutors and considered best practices, and they came up with 10 recommendations. We're coming back on January 31st for an implementation report with that group. So we do take these things seriously. The board recommended that we adopt body-worn cameras. We've done that we enter a contract with Monarch Services to have third-party options for reporting for women in custody, and that we produce a video, which now is running daily, and other things. They also recommended that a sheriff's detective is the most effective way to investigate all claims and complaints in the jail, and we support that. So I can provide additional information about the work we've done there at the request of your board, but I just want to acknowledge and again thank the Commission for the work they've done, and thank you to the board for supporting the Commission's work. Thank you.
Thank you. That'll be our final speaker, and I'll be bringing it back to the board for action. Supervisor Leopold.
Thank you, Chair. First, let me express my great appreciation for all the people who participated in the Justice and Gender Task Force. This effort has been part college course, part support group, part policy workshop, and that I think has been very helpful because we didn't. Dr. Green, at the beginning of her efforts, laid out a map of different islands that we were going to visit as part of this. And we started off on looking at trauma because we felt like that was important to start at a place where we could look at some of the roots of the reason why people end up in our criminal justice system. And we heard from lots of speakers. We heard from women who have experience in the criminal justice system. We heard from children whose parents have been incarcerated. Every meeting had some readings so we could be better informed, so we could have informed discussions. The conversation was always very lively at these meetings, and when we sat down to sort of look at what we had done over 9 or 10 meetings to come with recommendations, it was very thoughtful conversation in which there was consensus on all the items that are listed here. One of the things that I think is important that we heard today and which should help drive some of our work in this area is we aren't just talking about an individual woman who's in the criminal justice system, which on average is about 20 to 22 days in our system. We're talking about all the other people in their lives, including the children. When we hear from young people who've experienced the trauma that has been created by the arresting of their parents, we think to ourselves, these are something that we could change. And we heard from law enforcement representatives from a number of agencies, some who had written policies and some who identified that they needed to create written policies. And I think that is very important. Coupled with training and collecting data, seems to be also very important there. To think about this Bill of Rights, which the state has already adopted, but it should be prominently displayed so people know what their rights are, becomes critical. And to talk about something that seems kind of simple, that children should be able to visit their parents, and that it shouldn't be just through a cage or a glass, but to have physical contact, to be able to talk with them, to have that happen as soon as possible, becomes really important to limiting the trauma that child is already experiencing, seeing their parent go into jail, possibly being placed in a foster home, having their life upended. And when you look at the statistics of people who are in jail, who I think the numbers are half of them had parents who are in jail. Anything we could do to reduce that number makes a big difference to the public safety of our community. On the issue of housing, this is an issue which this board has taken very seriously and has worked very hard to address a number of different elements to increase the availability of housing. This recommendation asks us to come and look at our own properties and try to see if we could use our own resources to address this critical need. When I hear from a mother who has been in jail, who's cleaned herself up, who has gotten a job, is ready to reunite with her family, but for the lack of housing, can't be with her children, and their children can't be with their mother, it seems to me that we're missing out on a great opportunity to, again, bend that arc to be able to ensure greater or better outcomes for both the mother and the children. This is going to require leadership on our part because if sites are identified, and we not only have to back that up with some resources, but we may also have to back it up with our commitment to in the community, because no one ever seems to like anybody who isn't like them moving into their community. And when you say we're creating some spaces for women coming out of the criminal justice system so they can be with their family, that may be widely accepted, or it may need that we need to stand up and talk about the value of what we've learned through the reports that have been presented to this board and through this task force. So I encourage all my colleagues to think about this and be ready to show that leadership when the time comes. In regards to the final area, when this was discussed within the task force, there were clear issues that were identified by members of the task force about an independent agent being the one to do the investigation for all the reasons that were laid out. This becomes important for how it looks, but also how it would actually be carried out. And I think it's important for us to ask the sheriff to consider that as part of the work in addressing the outstanding work the sheriff has done to look at this issue. I want to acknowledge that the sheriff office has already, in the course of time that this task force has been meeting, has already done a number of great things, reopened Blaine Street, that has created this division of reentry, that took suggestions about guidelines about the video that the undersheriff just talked about, and has been very committed to open dialogue and presenting and being part of this task force. The judiciary and the district attorney's office has also been involved in this task force, and the fact that we, after a recent discussion about restorative justice, have been taken seriously. Just had more conversations this morning with the district attorney about this, about the issue of restorative justice, could play a role in helping deal with the issues that women face in our criminal justice system. So to my fellow task force member, I want to acknowledge that having the conversation is already creating change, and we are working with partners who share some of these same interests. The task force didn't drive all these changes, but the county system is working to address some of these pieces. I want to thank Susan Green for her leadership as part of this. She is faced when you take 25 years of experience and you say fit it into 2-hour increments over that only happen once a month with 20 people who may or may not all show up. You have to really be thoughtful about how that's done and be able to connect with people. And I think the richness of the conversation has ensured that most of the time we have almost everybody there. And the outreach that Susan has done to make sure that people who aren't there are included, even if they can't make it to the meeting, makes a big difference. I also want to acknowledge Nicole Coburn and Sven Stafford, who have also attended every single meeting, have helped out with technical aspects of it, but I feel as though they are partners in this effort as well, and I just want to recognize that. Nicole has many years working with the Sheriff's Department on budgets, and in her role as Assistant CAO has a broader portfolio, but the time that you've committed to it and the time that Sven has committed to it has been really outstanding, and I want to thank you. I also want to appreciate the other departments who have put in time, HSA and HSD, who have already started looking at their own policies and programs to be able to address these issues. The task force is going to continue to meet. And there are other areas in which the task force is going to be taking a look at, and we'll come back to this board at the end of 2019 with additional policy suggestions. But I think it says a lot for our board, made up of men, who are committed to addressing the issue of women in our community, their families, and in a way that not only helps reduce recidivism, but increase public safety in our entire community. And with that, I would recommend that we adopt all the recommended actions and all the different suggestions that are in this report.
Motion by Leopold, second by McPherson. Is there any other discussion?
I just wanted to ask Nicole Colborn, the number 4 to identify the safe housing, and that's a cooperative effort. Is that realistic? I mean, it seems like it should be, and where we might be able to place this type of housing. Do you think we will be able to have this ready by June? It seems like I think we should, and I surely want to make that direction as if it needs a stronger support motion of any type. But do you think we can accommodate that?
I think the preliminary report coming back in June will be fine, and there might be future additional information that we need to return to the board with, but we wanted to be aggressive and provide an initial deadline in June.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Greg?
Yeah. The task force, you've really done your homework. We need to get this information, and the thing that shocked me, there were 31 interviews. They were all in the jail, and 30 out of the 31, if I read it correctly, were arrested on an average of 12 times before. Is that correct?
I think you got to come to the microphone if you're going to respond.
I believe 30 of the 31 had been incarcerated before. An average of 12 times had been arrested before. Yes, that's correct.
So then we get, I'll do this quickly. Then we're talking about once they're released from jail, how important it is to have the cooperation of, we have the probation department, then we have child protective services, mental health, housing. I mean, how is the cooperation? We can help try to solve something in the jail, but then how is the cooperation once they get out of the jail? What would you say about child protective services? The mom gets out, the child was placed somewhere else. I know they have hard work and all that. Yeah.
I would say that particularly family cases. And every case really is unique, right? These are individual lives. We know our own lives. Lives are complicated. There's a lot of different people and influences, so I can't really speak to that. I think that the Division of Reentry under Cynthia Chase's leadership at the jail is a direct effort at coordinating what you're talking about. Right. And you brought up the high rate of recidivism for women in our jails, and I know one woman talked about it as these women are serving a life sentence 30 days at a time.
Wow.
So I think to really recognize the rate at which so many people are cycling in and out for the reasons that have been discussed today, and the costs, both in safety and dollars, public dollars, I know we can do better, and so thank you.
Yeah, and I guess with the child, a lot of times, no matter how bad the situation might be, they want to be with mom, right? So how do you deal with that? I mean, this is going to be part of the Bill of Rights.
Right. So I think that, again, every situation is unique, and there are some cases where it may not be legally or otherwise appropriate, but we can support healthy relationships with parents and children, even if they're not always living together or have lived together before. So when that is appropriate and legal and healthy, I think that there can be more done to support healthy relationships. And as we started, we know how important those relationships are.
Thank you. This is a very serious and sad situation that we're actually dealing with. It is of utmost importance that we look at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Zach?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to actually compliment the people that spoke. This is not an easy forum to share your personal stories. I mean, there's never an easy forum to share a personal story like this, but this is disproportionately difficult. And you taking the time to share that is how change actually occurs, and you should be commended for taking the time to do it and having the willingness to share that in this space. That means a lot. And the Commission's recommendations are practical, actionable, and necessary. And it's important that when recommendations come back, there's actually something real about them that can be implemented, and they don't just end up on a shelf somewhere. And I think that what came forward are those things. They will be actionable, not just for the board, but for the community at large. And so I appreciate the work of the Commission for that reason as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. That will. With a thank you to everyone here today and everyone who couldn't make it today who made this happen. This will adjourn our meeting to our next regularly scheduled Board of Supervisors meeting on January 29th.